Okay, welcome to the last session of this conference. I hope you all had a good time. And I give you a little bit overview about the Postgres community. Since about 2.5 years, I'm running weekly interviews, which is called Postgres Person of the Week. A couple of you here in the room already did this interview. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I think. It's all started in February 2020 with Laetitia as the first interview. And ever since, every Monday, I publish a new interview. This interview series is not only to bring all the hackers we see every day on a hackers mailing list, but really shine some light on all the people who are doing something in this community one way or another. My name is Andreas Scherbaum. I live in Germany, in Berlin. I'm one of the founding members of Postgres Europe, so we run a couple conferences like Postgres Europe conference in 1 month in Berlin. It's sold out. I'm sorry if you want a ticket. Postgres conference Germany, FOSDEM PG Day, and a couple more, like Vic over there runs Paris PG Day. We have a little more. For about 10 years, I was working for EMC, Pivotal, now VMware, on something called Greenplum. And 2 years ago, I joined Adjust GmbH in Berlin. We are doing mobile attribution, and I'm heading the database team there. So if you want to work on something like a couple hundred databases, 20, 30 terabytes plus, come join us. This is not moving forward. You can find the slides for this talk on my website. So if you just search my name on Google, you will find my blog. And on my blog on the right side, there's a link called Writings and Talks. If you go there, you find all presentations I ever give at any conference. You can also find me on Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn, of course, and my blog again. Good, enough about me. This talk is, I give you a little overview how I do all of the interviews, then a couple technical details, and the biggest part of the talk is what I did learn about the community. Anyone knows where this is or what this is? Ilaria. You're not Italian. It's the Supreme Court of Catassin in Rome. This. It's Castle St. Angelo, also in Rome. So how is this related to this talk? 2019 to 2020, we've been over New Year's Eve in Rome. That's my kid and me running around in the morning. And over time, we were joined by Magnus and Devrim. And then I started pondering around this idea, what could I do with the community? I've seen other projects, like a Python project, doing this. Now these days, the OpenStreetMap project is also doing interviews with people. And while we were discussing, we were sitting in a Hard Rock Cafe, we were walking around in Rome. How can I do this? What can I do? 2 months later, I had a project takeoff, asked a couple of people if I can interview them. Hardest part was actually finding the domain name for it. And then took off since there for 2.5 years now. On the technical side, I'm using Hugo, which is a static blocking platform. So you write your content in Markdown and you compile your text to static HTML pages and upload it somewhere. In my case, it's a GitHub repository. Every time I check into the repository, it's automatically checked out on the web server. So like 1 second later, it's online. I have a preview version for anyone who gets an interview. So everyone who was interviewed gets a link to a Google document from me. You get a couple questions, you can change, you can answer or not answer. Once it is done, there's another round of review. See if there are any logical errors in the interview. There's at least one preview and then at some point it gets published. Yeah, as I mentioned, every Monday it's posted on Planet Postgres, so if you're not subscribed to Planet Postgres, please go and do it now. Many people are publishing nice blog posts there. I always aim to have like 4 to 6 interviews ready, and every time I publish a blog post on LinkedIn, I get like 4 to 6 new requests from people I never met, I don't know. By now I checked my mailbox, it's about 250 requests I got, but LinkedIn says by today it's 146, so obviously they can't count. Over time I collected quite a few data points about all the interviews I'm doing. So I know I have one sheet which has all the interview stats, like what's the current status for every interview. I have one sheet with all the data from the candidates. I have one sheet with overall statistics for this talk. I know who recommended which other person for an interview. I know in one sheet who likes which extension, who's going to which conference. And this gives me a pretty good data points here. Let's take a look. Biggest question, who's using Postgres and who's using PostgreSQL? It's pretty evenly split. People are using either PostgreSQL or Postgres, depending on mostly for which companies they're working. If their company is using Postgres instead of PostgreSQL, most of the people are also using Postgres in their interview. But again, evenly split. However, only a very small minority actually want to change the name of the project. So it's only 6 people who say, okay, let's finally do it, let's change it, let's get rid of the old name, no one knows how to spell it. The vast majority is actually okay with either using PostgreSQL or Postgres as an alias. That's nice to know. How many people I have? I have by now 426 names in my list. Not everyone was asked so far. If I did an interview with you, you know I asked you which other people I could potentially interview. I'll talk about this in a moment. I started 214 interviews and I completed 134. So what about the others? There were 100 people who started an interview and never completed it. If you're one of these people, please go ahead and look in your emails. I have at least 2 names in the room. So far I published 130 interviews. And I have 7 people who said, thanks, but no thanks. Happens. Out of the 413 people I got, 426 people I got, 264 names got recommended by me. So that's mostly these are names who don't appear on a mailing list. So if you go to Hackers, you will not find these names, but they are one way or another active in the community. And that's good because the whole point of this interview is actually bringing these people a little bit more into the spotlight. Uh, 56 names got recommended twice. 60 names got recommended 3 times. 171 names got recommended once. That's good. And 1 name got recommended 12 times. Anyone knows who this is? You mean Devrim? You say Tom Lane. Its name is Devrim. Yes, you are right. It's Tom. And Tom actually said, yeah, thanks, but I would rather not do it. It's okay. Out of the, well, I sent you questions, and as part of the header of the document is, please recommend me 3 other names. I get mostly 3 other names. I also have people who send me like 8 or 9 other names. Thank you for that. It's very helpful. Where are the people coming from in a community? What's your guess? What are the top 3 countries? Any idea? France? United States? Any other idea? Germany? Well, United States is correct. France is correct, yes. Welcome. And Russia is actually, no, India these days it's 12. India and Russia flip around every time I do an interview. For Russia, I actually have to say there are a couple of interviews which are ready to publish, and we are holding them back because of the ongoing situation there. In total, we have 33 countries people coming from. That's a wide community. What is the first Postgres version someone used when they started doing their work with Postgres? Version 9.6 was very popular. Version 8.2 was very popular. Well, we also have someone who actually started working on Postgres before it was PostgreSQL. Go and read the interview with Elaine. It's very interesting. We probably need to work a little bit on 14 and 15, getting new people in a community working on this. Maybe in a year or 2 it looks different. As part of the interview, I asked you to give me some tags, and tags are used to link interviews to other people's interviews. So if you say something like, okay, I do mountain biking, you see not many people are doing this. If you say, okay, I have a Postgres pet, that's another form of interview. Yeah, there are 6 other people who have a pet which I already got interviewed. How many tags do we have? Well, maybe we have people who use 1 or 2 or 3 tags, but I don't really count. This is a very large number. And then we start with things like Ansible is very popular. A couple countries and couple companies here are very popular. So we have France in it, and Italy and Japan. Of course, we have PostGIS here. We also have Postgres Woman, which is nice. And I like that the community tag is still very high on the list. This is for going on like a year. It doesn't change. How many tags are used? So 300 tags I have only used once. I probably need to go back at some point and talk with people about finding better tags, because 300 tags who don't have any other related interview doesn't really make sense. And then we have the 18 here, community. Okay, diversity. About 4/5 is the male contributors to the community. We have, or I have 21 interviews published by female contributors. Could be more. If you know any names in the community, please let me know. How many people in the community like sailing? Any idea? 1, okay. At least 1. This is actually Magnus' boat. It's called the Blue Ribbon. A couple of people have seen it or have been on it. Any other number? Well, it's a couple more. 5 people say they like sailing. That's interesting. Also, a couple of people like photography or swimming, and in terms of sports, it's really cycling and hiking as the most part, hiking or walking around. For a long time, I thought we have a very active running community, but it's not really the case. We have a couple of very avid runners in the community, but not a majority. And then if you move back home after you went running or cycling or whatsoever, people like to do reading or like to watch a movie. That's fine. Occasionally we have people playing chess. We also have people playing chess at a conference somewhere, or playing Monopoly here, if you went to the Crunchy Data booth. What's your favorite drink? It's either beer or coffee. It's evenly split all the time. Where do we find the Postgres people on social media? It's mostly on Twitter and LinkedIn. Surprising. And quite a few people write blog posts. But blog posts are kind of a one-way street. I write something, I publish something, but you can't really comment on it. Only if I publish this also on Twitter or LinkedIn, and you can comment on my posts there. So if you want to interact with the community, you have to have a Twitter account and or a LinkedIn account these days. Ilaria, are you listening? You need a Twitter account. What's the most favorite conference we have in the Postgres community? PGD Paris. New York, EU, any other takes? Well, you did two right. Most favorite one is PGConf EU. And then next one is PGCon. Actually, New York is included in Postgres Open. So yeah, good fourth place. And then we have PGD Paris on Platz. It's 5, 6, Nordic.
Technically, you're saying fourth place.
Yes, it's.
But I think that's third place. Aside from
Okay, both are fourth place. Yeah, we have India or PGConf DE here. And in total, people mentioned 32 conferences. Remember in 2018, 2019, when we had at least one conference per month, and you could decide where you want to go? We are heading back there already. So this is New York. Then we have Berlin, Postgres Conference Europe next month. Then FOSDEM is coming. Nice. Most favorite extension? There's only one answer. By far, it's PG-stat statements. And quite a few people say this should actually be in core. This should be in a database. It should not be an extension. Because like everyone is using it, overhead of using it is not really big. Should be preloaded in any database we have. And then second place is PostgreSQL. Quite a few people using it, but I think we can do better in reaching out to the PostgreSQL community and get these people involved a little bit more in our Postgres community. Kind of feels like this is two separate communities who are only bound by using the same database. And that's it. Surprisingly, PG Auto-Explain is noted quite often, and Citus extension is noted quite often. Good job. How many people make a living out of working with Postgres? You do? Quite a few people in this room do, including me. Out of the 134 interviews which are published by today or by this week, 106 people work in one way or another on a Postgres career. Would you have imagined this 10 years ago? That you can make a decent living out of working with Postgres? Out of working for an open source product? Yeah, maybe, maybe not. Maybe not at this scale. Does Postgres have a future? Yes or no? Well, the only answer is yes, which I get. And 20 people didn't really answer the question, but no one said Postgres doesn't have a future. What this future looks like, anything between more commercial, up to more open source and don't really know. But no one really says, okay, in 5 years it's done. Would you recommend Postgres for private and or business use cases? Most people say, yes, it's good for business, because why not? There are not many people who say it's not good for business, or there are certain other databases who are better for certain use cases. A couple less people say it's also good for private use cases, and the note I take from this, from the interviews is, it's too complicated for someone to set up Postgres as a private user if you want to have it as a small project. I think we can do better in this area. For business, you have someone who installs it for you, runs it for you, manages for you. There are quite a few cloud offerings. That's really easy to do these days. If you just want to run a blog or a small website or, I don't know, it's still a little bit complicated. Other offerings in the database market are easier or bundled together with a product. Makes life easier. How should one start contributing to the Postgres code? There are basically 3 venues. Start by reviewing patches on CommitFest. Start by reading a mailing list and get some idea what people are talking about. And you know what happens, people subscribe to hackers and instantly unsubscribe because you get 5,000 emails per day. No one really wants to do this. And then write patches. So no one really, a couple of people say subscribe to hackers, but it's really only a low number. The most recommended path reading mailing lists is really subscribe to one of the other mailing lists, like general, start helping people answering questions, or maybe subscribe to bug and see if you can help for a specific bug. There's a novice mailing list for people who really don't know how to start with Postgres. A couple avenues you can do. It doesn't have to be hackers. Most common way is really go to CommitFest website, pick a patch where you think you can contribute, where you can do a review. This helps. You get an idea how the code looks like, you get an idea how the entire workflow is. And then once you're familiar with that, you can start writing your own patch and submit it using CommitFest. Does Postgres need 64-bit transaction IDs? Yes, 7. I think in these days we have quite a few use cases out there who really do very high transactional workload. I know for databases we run, we have a few who run through 32 or 2 billion transaction IDs in like a couple of weeks. It's really hard to manage. If we don't pay a close attention to these databases, we have trouble. Better vacuum would improve the situation, but also 64-bit transaction IDs would improve the situation. Does Postgres need a multi-master implementation? Five people say so. When asked how and why, mostly it makes life easier because apparently you can scale and have 2 or multiple masters in your system and can write to any instance, and you don't have to do the dance with like PG bouncer redirecting reads and writes to different databases. It makes life easier. It's not really about we want to have 5 or 10 different master systems and write into all of them. It's about the entire ecosystem around it. How do I get all of my writes into a database without taking care of additional setups? So maybe one way to solve this problem is to do things like PG bounce or PG pool in a better way. Maybe integrate a connection pooler into the core and make this problem go away. Has Postgres a low or high entry barrier? What's your take? That's the best answer. Jonathan said, if you're either using it or if you want to develop for it. Come on. Yes, if you just want to use it, the entry barrier is not really high. If you have a Linux distribution, any of them has Postgres packed. If you have Windows, you can just go to the Postgres website and download an installer. As a user, it is really easy to use these days. As a developer, not so much. If you want to land a patch in Postgres, any patch, it may take you 2 years, and it's not really sure that you ever land a patch there. Development cycle is really hard. It's so quite a few feedback I got here is that the project should improve the development cycle, the development process, especially for new people coming into the project. It's hard to do that. There's plenty more data in these interviews. Occasionally, when I publish 2 or 3 interviews, I see, okay, I've seen this fact before. Then I go back into all the interviews and add a new data point, like with the 64 bit transaction IDs. I've seen this a couple of times. I went back into all the interviews and found out how many people talked about it and what was the general feedback around it. Next time you see this talk, I will have a couple more slides, a couple more interesting data points. Come back. Any questions? Wait.
I can scream. Companies are missing. Where are the companies? I require data of companies, of people.
How do I put second quadrant into this picture? Quite a few people worked for second quadrant, but are no longer working for second quadrant because the company doesn't exist anymore. It's complicated. Yes, I could do that. Any other questions? I'm standing between you and steak and beer, right?
No, I'm standing between everyone and steak here. We have a closing session.
Yeah, about now. Ilaria, could you bring the microphone, please? Yes, the slides will be online. If you go to my website, I have a link on it, Writings and Talks, and I publish the slides there. Come again? The data? Well, the data in theory is online because all the interviews are published. The aggregated data is not public. You could go through all the interviews and just gather all the data, yes.
I have one more question, actually. How did you parse all of this data? Did you actually read everything and take notes, like the German person you
Yes.
are? Oh my God. Beautiful.
There's a really big spreadsheet which gathers all the data and has like 10 different tabs for all the details.
That sounds really inefficient.
If you have a better way to do this, I am all ears.
I don't know. Postgres text mining, there is some way.
Yeah. Couple of things I could do with text mining, but not all of them. We have a question over there?
I'm room hosting now.
Yes, thank you.
How do you choose people for the interview? Because I think that you have more requests than real interviews.
How do I choose more people? Let me go back. So I literally have a list of 426 names in this big spreadsheet. And what I don't ask all of them at the same time. I literally just pick random names in it, try to find out who recommended this person to me if I don't have any contact details, contact whoever recommended me and ask for an email address, and then reach out and ask this person if she or he wants to be interviewed. Random process. No, it's not one by one. It's literally random. I scroll through and see, okay, I haven't asked this person, and then it's my next. And I do this in waves. So I'm not going, next week I do one person. When I see, okay, I'm running low on interviews to publish, I go and ask like 10 more people. And then I get like 5, 6 answers back. It takes a while until all the interviews are published. And then next wave.
You should make a graph or something. Use Neo4j. That is a very good database for this use case.
Okay. Okay. Any more questions? Yes.
How many, for the people that decline, like why do they decline?
For the people who decline, why do they decline? For most of them, they just say, okay, I don't want to be interviewed. I don't want to be in a spotlight. I don't want to be in an open there. Okay, I would say time for beer. Thank you, everyone.